Paul Heap, put that down and step over here.
Oh, was this about the phone I had on the wing last week? Because I already...
This operation had been in the works for months. Paul Heap, a 14-year prison officer at HMP Altcourse, walked straight into it. By the time that rucksack was opened, his career, his freedom, and 9 years of his life were already gone.
Was this about the phone I had on the wing last week? Because I already explained to the duty governor that...
This is about what's inside those cartons in your rucksack. Crack cocaine, heroin, cannabis, spice, and 2,000 steroid tablets.
What? Wait, no, I...
14 years in the same uniform. 14 years of keys, radios, wing checks, and roll calls. And on a Wednesday morning he was nominally supposed to spend at home sick, Paul Heap walked through the staff entrance of HMP Altcourse, carrying a rucksack containing 215,000 pounds of heroin, crack cocaine, cannabis, spice, and more than 2,000 steroid tablets hidden inside 2 hollowed-out cartons of supermarket fruit juice. The Titan Prison Corruption Unit had been watching him for months. 11 offenses, 9 years. The cartons would become the most famous evidence photo Merseyside police published that year. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. How well do you really know the person standing on the other side of a locked door from a prisoner? The officer with the keys, the radio, and 14 years of trust on his record? Drop your honest answer in the comments. And hit subscribe. This channel covers the cases the mainstream British press buries on page 9, and this one deserves the front page. Paul Heap was born in Liverpool in 1974, the kind of North Side Merseyside upbringing that produced 2 generations of dock workers, bus drivers, and shift pattern men in uniform. He grew up in a terraced house within walking distance of Aintree Racecourse, the youngest of 3, raised by a mother who cleaned offices in the city center and a father who worked the night shift at the Ford plant in Halewood until a bad back forced him out at 52. The household was tight on money and tighter on rules. Tea at 6, school shoes polished on a Sunday, father in front of the television by 9:30. Friends from his school years would later describe Paul as quiet, watchful, and physically larger than his classmates from the age of about 12 onward. He was not a fighter. He was the one the fighters knew not to bother. He left school at 16 with 5 GCSEs, a pair of which were close to failing, and went into a series of stop-start jobs across North Liverpool. Stockroom at a builder's merchant on Long Lane. A 6-month stretch driving a forklift at a refrigerated warehouse in Bootle. A year on the door at a pub on County Road that catered to the Walton end of the Everton support. The door work taught him something about authority. He learned how to talk a drunk man down without putting hands on him. He learned how to read a room. He learned that a uniform, even a black bomber jacket and a clipboard, changed the way people spoke to him. He applied to the prison service the first time in 1999 and was turned down on a paperwork issue. He applied again in 2003 and was accepted. His initial training was at HMP Service College, Newbold Revel in Warwickshire, the same 8-week residential program that put thousands of new officers into English jails through the early 2000s. His instructor's notes from that period would later be read into the record at sentencing. Heap, they wrote, was reliable, physically confident, and showed sound judgment in restraint exercises. One instructor flagged him as comfortable with prisoners in a way that some new recruits are not, intended at the time as a compliment. He finished training in the late spring of 2003 and was assigned to HMP Altcourse in Fazakerley, a 4-mile drive from the house where he had grown up. Altcourse had opened in 1997 as the first privately managed prison built under the Private Finance Initiative, operated under contract by Group 4, later G4S. By the time Heap walked through the gate as Officer Heap, the prison held a little under 1,200 Category B adult male prisoners across multiple house blocks, with a constantly rotating population of remand prisoners moving in and out from Liverpool and Manchester Crown Courts. It was busy. It was understaffed. It rewarded officers who could keep their head down, work the overtime, and stay on the right side of the senior staff. Heap fit that profile from the first month. He married in 2006. A woman from Walton he had known since he was 19, a hairdresser who ran her own chair at a salon on Rice Lane. They bought a small terraced house in Hartley's Village in Aintree the same year, 2 streets back from the canal, with a postage stamp garden and a view of the railway embankment. 2 children followed across the next 4 years. From the outside, the Heap household looked like a particular Merseyside success story. Public sector job with a pension, wife with her own income, a house that was theirs on paper, if not yet on the mortgage statement. The kind of holiday photos in summer that ended up framed in the hallway. His annual reviews through the late 2000s and early 2010s were unremarkable in the way that long careers in the prison service are unremarkable. Meets expectations. Effective on the wing. Good relationships with colleagues. Twice he was commended in writing for his conduct during incidents. One, a cell fire on B Wing in 2009. That he and another officer extinguished before the response team arrived. The other, a self-harm intervention in 2012, where his early action was credited with saving a young remand prisoner's life. He picked up his 10-year service pin in 2013. By 2015, he was one of the most senior officers on his shift pattern, the kind of veteran the newer recruits asked for advice, and the kind of name the senior management trusted to handle the wings on a thin night. What the reviews could not see, what no review ever sees until it is too late, was that the financial scaffolding under that comfortable surface had started to crack. The expensive holidays continued. The car was newer than the salary suggested it should be. The credit card statements piled up in a kitchen drawer. By 2015, prosecution material would later show he was running balances on multiple credit accounts and taking out small loans to service older debts. By 2016, he had started reducing his working hours at Altcourse, fewer shifts, more days off, at a time when his outgoings were going up, not down. That arithmetic does not balance on a prison officer's wage. Something else was filling the gap. To understand what Paul Heap did, you have to understand the building he did it in. HMP Altcourse in Fazakerley is a Category B men's prison on a 40-acre site off Higher Lane, ringed by a 5-meter perimeter wall, 2 layers of fencing, and a continuous CCTV envelope monitored from a central control room. At the time of the offenses, it housed between 1,100 and 1,200 prisoners, a mix of sentenced men serving medium-length terms and remand prisoners awaiting trial at Liverpool Crown Court, a few miles down the A580. It was run under a private finance initiative contract by G4S, the same multinational security company that runs prisons, courts, and migrant facilities across the United Kingdom. The staff entrance at Altcourse is a controlled vestibule. Officers arriving for shift swipe in, pass through an airlock-style double door, present themselves at a search desk, and then proceed through to the secure side of the prison. In theory, every officer's bag can be opened. In theory, every officer's pockets can be patted down. In theory, the same drug detection dog that sniffs visitors at the family hall can be deployed against staff bags. In practice, and the Prison and Probation Ombudsman has said this in successive reports across the last decade, Staff searching at most English prisons most of the time is light, inconsistent, and weighted toward trust. Veteran officers walking in with a familiar bag and a familiar face are, in the language of the audits, rarely subject to intrusive search. That gap is where the contraband economy lives. Inside the wall, the prison economy is its own market. A gram of heroin on the street in Liverpool in 2017 might wholesale at 30 to 50 pounds. Inside Altcourse, that same gram could sell for 3 to 5 times that figure, paid in commissary credit, mobile phone top-ups, or violence promised against another prisoner. A single mobile phone, the unlocked, pay-as-you-go burner kind, easy to buy in any high street, could change hands inside the wall for several £100s. A SIM card on its own had a market. Spice, the synthetic cannabinoid that had begun to overwhelm English jails in the mid-2010s, sold by the spray-soaked page of paper, smuggled in books, in legal mail, in letters from family. Steroids, the entry-level contraband of the prison gym economy, had a steady, almost industrial-scale demand on the wings, where lifting weights was one of the few legal outlets for time and aggression. The two structural defenses against that economy are perimeter searches, visitors, mail, deliveries, and intelligence work. Perimeter searches catch the amateurs, the visitor with a wrap in a baby's nappy, the released prisoner trying to throw a package over the wall from the field behind the prison, the drone dropping a bag on the exercise yard at 3 a.m. Intelligence work catches the professionals, the staff. By 2016, every English prison was supposed to have a security department with corruption prevention responsibilities, and the regional and national serious organized crime architecture had been retooled around units like Titan, the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit, whose prison corruption subunit existed specifically to investigate suspected staff involvement in the supply chain. The Titan unit did not run the wings. It ran the names. It built cases. It watched. And when it was time, it walked in through the same gate the officer had walked through 10,000 times before, and it asked to see what was in the bag. The debts came first. The court file at Liverpool Crown Court would later set out, in the dry language that money trouble always takes on a charge sheet, that by 2015, Paul Heap was running balances across multiple credit card accounts and personal loans. The combined exposure was not catastrophic by the standards of a man with a full-time job. It was instead the kind of slow, compounding pressure that turns a household budget into a monthly emergency. He was paying minimums. He was rolling balances. He was, in the prosecution's later phrasing, servicing older debts with newer credit. Anyone who has ever stood at a kitchen table at 11:30 at night with 3 statements in front of them and a calculator on a phone knows the exact mood. And yet the holidays continued, the summer trips abroad, the flights booked, the hotels that were not the cheapest hotel on the comparison site. The car parked outside the house in Hartley's village that, by 2016, was newer than the maths of his payslip suggested it should be. Reduced hours at the prison were stacked on top of that. He was working less and spending the same. Somewhere across 2016, the gap between what the salary covered and what the lifestyle cost became a gap that someone, somewhere, was prepared to fill in exchange for a service only an officer could provide. The prosecution case would frame what happened next, not as a single moment of recruitment, but as a slide. Officers who go bad at the level Heap went bad rarely wake up one morning and decide to bring 215,000 pounds of narcotics through the gate. They start smaller. A SIM card carried in for someone. A small package of tobacco when tobacco was first restricted. a favor that earned a few £100 in cash, dropped into the kitchen drawer with the unopened credit card statements. The next favor pays the next month's minimum. The next favor pays the holiday deposit. The favor after that pays a debt that has stopped feeling like a debt and started feeling like a leash. What the Titan Unit's analysts later mapped was a man who, by the spring of 2017, was no longer simply servicing his own debts, but moving wholesale weight. The rucksack that walked into HMP Altcourse on the morning of 28th June 2017 was not a starter package. The composition of it, multiple Class A drugs, Class B cannabis, spice, more than 2,000 steroid tablets, plus mobile telephony hardware, was a full-service consignment, the kind of mixed load that a prison-side operation orders in one go because it covers every market on the wings at once. Crack and heroin for the bulk demand, cocaine for the higher-end users, cannabis for the steady volume, spice because spice had become, by 2017, the most disruptive single drug inside the English estate. Steroids because the gym economy on the wings never slowed down. A phone and SIM cards because the next order had to be routed somehow, and you do not route orders through the prison landline. The method was almost insulting in its domesticity. 2 cartons of supermarket fruit juice, the kind that sits on a shelf in any Tesco or Asda in the country, hollowed out and resealed. Heavier than a carton of juice should be, re-glued at the top in a way that, on close inspection, would not pass a search-trained eye. But search-trained eyes were not, as a routine matter, being passed across Officer Heap's rucksack at the staff entrance. He was Officer Heap, 14 years, 2 commendations in writing, the man you wave through. The operational details inside the prison, who, exactly on which wing, was going to receive the cartons that morning, were never spelled out fully in open court. Heap, in interview, said only that he was acting under pressure from a prisoner he would not name. The prosecution accepted that there was pressure in the broad sense, that he was indebted, that he was being used, that he was not the architect of the network. They did not accept that pressure as a defense. He had walked through the gate 11,000 times across 14 years. He could have stopped any of those times. He could have walked into the security governor's office and said the words. He did not. He kept walking. The red flags missed at his own end were the kind that a determined household can hide. The cash in unmarked envelopes in unusual places. The holiday photographs that did not match a reduced hour's payslip. The credit card balances that should have been rising but were quietly going down. His wife would later say, through her solicitor, that she had not known. Colleagues at Altcourse would later say, through prison service interviews, that they had not known. The honest position is that the people closest to him either did not see it or did not let themselves see it, and that the prison's own internal defenses, staff search, behavioral monitoring, financial declaration, did not catch him. What caught him was a different department altogether. Intelligence is not a single document. Intelligence is a pattern. By the spring of 2017, the Titan Prison Corruption Unit, operating under the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit and working in partnership with Merseyside Police and the G4S security team at HMP Altcourse, had developed what investigators would later describe in open court only as focused intelligence against a serving officer at the prison. The unit does not, as a matter of policy, walk through what that intelligence was. It does not name informants. It does not detail surveillance. It does not, in a sentencing hearing, hand the defense a roadmap for the next officer who decides to go the same way. What the court was told was that the inquiry was sustained, that it had been running for a period, and that the operational decision on the morning of 28th of June 2017 was not random. Wednesday, 28th of June 2017 was on paper a sick day for Officer Heap. He had phoned in. He was not rostered. He was not expected at the gate. He was expected, if anywhere, at home in Hartley's village. At some point during the morning, however, he was seen entering HMP Altcourse in his civilian clothes, carrying a rucksack. The sighting was logged. It was passed up. It reached the desk of the security governor on duty that day, Mark Jones. Governor Jones did not act on hunch. He acted on the intelligence that was already sitting in the unit's file with Heap's name attached to it. The presence of a serving officer on a sick day, walking into the prison with a bag, was the trigger event the inquiry had been waiting for. Jones gave the instruction. Heap was to be stopped, searched, and held. The Titan Prison Corruption Unit attended in person. Uniformed Merseyside police officers attended in support. The search was conducted on the prison-controlled side of the staff entrance, in a room used for exactly this purpose, with the prison's own staff present as witnesses. Heap was asked to place the rucksack on the table. He was asked to open it. He was given the opportunity, in the careful sequence that all professional searches follow, to declare what was inside before the officers reached in themselves. The 2 fruit juice cartons came out of the rucksack first. They were not the only contents. The mobile phone came out. The SIM cards came out. But it was the cartons that the search team's attention settled on, because the cartons were the wrong weight. A full carton of supermarket fruit juice has a weight a search officer's hand learns within their first month on the gate. These 2 cartons were heavier than that and lighter than that at the same time, dense in places, hollow in places, resealed at the top with a glue that had not been applied at a factory. They were placed on the table. They were opened. What came out of them into evidence bags on a Wednesday morning at the staff entrance of HMP Altcourse was the operational case against Paul Heap: heroin, crack cocaine, cannabis, spice, more than 2,000 steroid tablets, a wholesale-to-prison street value, when the analysts later totaled it, of £215,000, plus the phone, plus the SIM cards. Heap was arrested at the table. He was cautioned. He was led out of the building he had walked into for 14 years, this time in handcuffs, by colleagues from a unit whose entire job is to make sure that officers like him do not get to walk back out again on a different shift. We are about to get into the investigation, the search of his house in Hartley's village, and what Merseyside police found in the cash hidden around his property. If you are still with me at this point in the video, you already know this channel does not stop where the gate closes. Hit subscribe before we go further. There is more in this one, and the sentence the judge handed down at the end is one of the longest a serving British prison officer has received in the last decade. The rucksack was the headline. The rucksack was not the case. The case was what came out of the next 48 hours, when Merseyside police, working alongside the Titan unit, executed search warrants on the address in Hartley's village, on Heap's car, and on the financial paperwork that had been quietly accumulating in the kitchen drawer. The house search produced more than £9,000 in cash. Some of it was in an envelope in a bedroom drawer. Some of it was in smaller bundles in other places around the property. The kind of distribution that a person uses when they no longer trust a single hiding place. Heap, in his first interview, said the cash was savings. He said it in the way that people say things to police when they have not yet worked out which version of the story they are going to commit to. The financial investigation that followed did not accept it as savings. The financial investigators traced the credit card balances, the loan repayments, the holiday bookings, the reduced shift hours, and the points across 2016 and 2017, at which sums of cash had moved through accounts in ways that no prison officer's salary could explain. The phone in the rucksack was forensically examined. The SIM cards were forensically examined. The court did not hear the full contents of those communications in open session. That level of detail is not, in cases involving organized supply, generally read into the record, because doing so compromises the next investigation into the same network. What the court was told was that the digital evidence corroborated the physical evidence. The rucksack was a delivery, the delivery was part of a sequence, and the sequence was operational. The wider intelligence picture, which the Titan unit had been developing for months before the search, was placed in a sealed annex to the prosecution file. Officers within the corruption unit gave evidence at sentencing about the duration of the inquiry, the seriousness of the harm it had been designed to interrupt, and the institutional damage caused by the involvement of a long-serving officer. They did not name sources. They did not name other officers. There has never been a public suggestion that any other Altcourse officer was implicated in the same supply chain. Heap, in the prosecution's framing, was the staff side conduit, and the wing side organization was prisoner-led. That framing matters because it is the framing that ultimately landed him with 11 separate counts. If he had been a courier alone, the charging picture would have been narrower. He was not a courier alone. He was the courier and the gateway. He carried the drugs. He carried the phones. He carried the SIMs. He carried the cash. He was, in the language of the offenses, in possession with intent to supply, in the act of conveying prohibited articles into a prison, and in possession of cash that was criminal property under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Each of those legal categories was satisfied multiple times over by what came out of the rucksack and out of the house. The colleague reaction inside HMP Altcourse, in the days after his arrest, was the reaction that long-serving institutions always have when one of their own is found on the wrong side of the line. Quiet, subdued. A small number of officers who had genuinely not seen it coming. A smaller number who, after the fact, started to recall the holiday talk and the new car and the days off and the financial conversations that had felt slightly off at the time. The security governor's office at Altcourse and G4S's national security leadership both later confirmed that internal procedures had been reviewed in the aftermath of the case. Whatever they reviewed, they did not publish in detail. The confrontation, in the technical sense of the moment Heap was caught, happened in the search room at the staff entrance of HMP Altcourse on the morning of Wednesday, 28th of June, 2017. The room was small, strip-lit, a metal table in the center. A camera in the upper corner of the room logged the entire interaction. Heap was asked to place his rucksack on the table. He did. He was asked whether he had anything to declare. He shook his head. "Officer Heap," the lead investigator said, "open the bag, please." "What's this about?" Heap asked. "Open the bag." He unzipped it. He stepped back from the table. He put his hands in his pockets and then took them out again and let them hang at his sides. The first carton came out of the bag, placed on the table by a gloved hand. The second carton followed. The phone, the SIM cards. "Are these your bags?" "Yeah." "Is this your rucksack?" "Yeah." "Can you tell us what's inside these cartons?" He did not answer. The lead investigator picked up the first carton, turned it in the light, and ran a gloved thumb along the resealed seam at the top. "Officer Heap, can you tell us what's inside this carton?" He did not answer. The carton was opened on the table. The contents were photographed in sequence. Heap watched. He did not look surprised. He did not look angry. The video log of the search, played later for the court, showed a man who had run out of things to say and who knew it. He was cautioned at the table. He was told he was being arrested on suspicion of possession with intent to supply controlled drugs and on suspicion of money laundering. He was asked whether he understood. He said he did. "I want a solicitor," he said. Those were the last words on the recording before he was led out of the room. The rest of his account, including the line about having been put under pressure by a prisoner he refused to name, was given later, in formal interview, with a solicitor present and the tape running. He did not at any point name the prisoner. He has not named the prisoner since. The charges, when they were finalized by the Crown Prosecution Service in the weeks that followed, totaled 11 offenses. 7 counts of possessing controlled drugs with intent to supply, covering the heroin, the crack cocaine, the cannabis, the spice, and the steroid tablets, charged under Section 5 of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. 3 counts of conveying a prohibited article into a prison, charged under Section 40 of the Prison Act 1952, covering the drugs, the mobile telephone, and the SIM cards as separate categories of conveyance. 1 count of possessing criminal property, charged under Section 329 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, covering the cash recovered from the house in Hartley's Village. Paul Heap pleaded guilty to all 11 counts. He entered his pleas at Liverpool Crown Court. He did not contest the evidence. He did not seek a trial. The full credit for an early guilty plea was applied to the sentencing exercise, which meant that the sentence the judge ultimately imposed reflected a reduction from a starting point that was significantly higher. The sentencing hearing took place at Liverpool Crown Court in September 2018, before His Honor Judge David Aubrey QC. The prosecution opened with the rucksack, the cartons, the drugs, the phone, the SIMs, the cash from the house, and then walked the court through the financial trail, the duration of the Titan Unit's inquiry, and the institutional context of the offending. The defense in mitigation did not contest the facts. They put forward the financial pressure. They put forward the unspecified pressure from a prisoner. They put forward the long, otherwise unblemished service record, including the 2 written commendations from earlier in his career. They asked the court to take into account that Heap had been a man who, before he had become the man on the indictment, had on at least 2 recorded occasions placed himself between a prisoner and serious harm. Judge Aubrey QC was not unsympathetic to the mitigation, but he was unequivocal on the gravity. He described Heap's conduct as a grave breach of trust. He noted that the offenses were not isolated, were not impulsive, and were not the work of a man who had stumbled into wrongdoing. They were the work of a long-serving officer who had, over a sustained period, traded the safety of his colleagues and the integrity of his institution for money. The judge observed that the consequence of that trade, inside the wings of HMP Altcourse, was harm. Harm to prisoners, harm to staff, harm to the families of both. He said that the case cast a shadow over the officers of HMP Altcourse who had done, and continued to do, their jobs honestly. He said that the public was entitled to expect that a prison officer's uniform meant what the uniform was supposed to mean, and that, when an officer chose to make it mean something else, the response of the courts had to reflect that choice. he sentenced Paul Heap to 9 years imprisonment. Heap was 43 at sentencing. He was taken down from the dock at Liverpool Crown Court that afternoon and processed into the prison estate as a Category B prisoner, the same category of prisoner he had spent 14 years guarding. He was held outside the Northwest region on the standard operating principle that former officers are not housed in the prisons they served in, or in prisons where their former colleagues are likely to be on staff. The exact establishment has not been publicly confirmed. Former prison officers serving custodial sentences in the United Kingdom are, as a matter of policy, housed under enhanced protective arrangements, in many cases on vulnerable prisoner units, away from the general population. The reasons are obvious to anyone who has worked the wings. At HMP Altcourse, the day Heap was sentenced, the staff rota carried on. The wings carried on. The Titan Prison Corruption Unit issued a short statement noting the successful conclusion of the operation and the close cooperation with G4S security at Altcourse and with Merseyside police. The statement did not name other lines of inquiry. It did not need to. The message it was carrying, to any other officer in any other English prison who had started taking phone calls about debts they could not service, was already in the sentence. 9 years, 11 counts, £215,000, 2 cartons of juice. That is what the dark side of the Keys looks like, with the lights on. This case was heavy, but the case on your screen right now, a serving officer who took it further, longer, and deeper than Paul Heap ever did, is the one you need to see next. Click it now.